video game system but not Atari Missile Command?
Well, then you must have Defender. Great game. Or a challenge like Star Raiders. What about Yar's Revenge? You gotta have Berserk, right? And Atari Space Invaders, a classic.
You don't? Come on. An Atari system without those games? That's like having a stereo with no hit records.
Today's episode, let's see here. I'm going to be focusing on Activision games, Imagic games, as well as some Coleco games, and then Vidtec / U.S. Games. So, as well as CBS Electronics. They're kind of just a hodgepodge. I figured I'd just cram them all into one video. Basically, I'm just going to kind of do a quick rundown like I did in the last video. Say a couple things about certain games. Some games I have more to say about others. Some games I enjoyed more than others. So, hopefully you guys enjoy. And like I said in the last video, at some point certain games are going to get more attention. And I do plan on doing a type of review where you actually get to see game footage and me playing the game. So, there you go. Okay, so I have sort of a little cheat sheet here because there's a lot of games that I played and there was certain things that I did not want to forget in kind of going over these. So, first up, I'm going to start with my Vidtec games / U.S. games. As always, I didn't bother to do any research. At some point in the future, I do plan on finding out why some of these say Vidtec and why some of them say U.S. Games, because they're all made by the same company, which is U.S. Games Corporation. These ones look pretty, close to the original Atari, an actual Atari, game cartridge. The only difference is there's these little slots back here, and the stickers obviously aren't as long as the box. So every company kind of did something a little different. I'm not quite sure if that had anything to do with patents or that sort of thing, but either way, there you have it. So I guess let's see here. Where am I at? I feel like I'm all over the place. All right, so first I'm going to start with Commando Raid. This one you can obviously see what the gameplay is like. There's a picture of it right on the box. It's okay. It's like Missile Command. I did enjoy this one the most out of all of them. This one kind of takes elements of Missile Command and makes it a little bit more kind of like the enemies are a little bit different, so to speak. But I just found myself getting kind of bored, and it's kind of repetitive after a while. But it's definitely worth to try out. There's obviously, guys being dropped off in parachutes that are going to, go underground. So you obviously have to destroy them before they get underground. There are ways to build back up your bases, which is pretty cool. Because obviously in games like Space Invaders, for example, when your base gets destroyed, there is no rebuilding it. So there's definitely some replayability here for sure. But overall, it's definitely a game that you would grow tired of playing. But I definitely recommend this one. So that's Commando Raid for sure. Up next, I had Space Jockey. This one, let's see here. Horizontal shooter, nothing special, boring. Yeah, I mean, you basically just kind of are flying across the screen, as you can see there. Nothing really too special. Obviously, anybody that ever talks about Atari, especially the Atari 2600, they're known for a lot of space games. It was the space age. A lot of films were popular in the theaters at that point that were space, space age or space theme type films. In general as well, it was the time that a lot of people were space exploring and people were going to the moon and there was astronauts, and it was big. It was a huge part of the culture back then. So of course there'd be dozens of games in relation to that. But this is one that's just not that memorable, so I'd skip it. And then up next, let's see here, Sneak and Peek. Yeah, this one was awful. This one was absolutely brutal. It's essentially just a 2-player game, but you can play against the computer. For whatever reason, I could not get my game to work properly. It's obviously hide and go sneak, or hide and go peek. Similar name, of course, Sneak and Peek. But when you play 2 players, it is actually easy to find the other player. However, when I played against the computer, I don't know if there was a glitch in it or if I wasn't playing it properly, but I was not able to ever find the CPU. However, the CPU was able to find me immediately. So I don't know if that had anything to do with the design of the game. I'm sure there's ways to make this game harder because there are there's variations, but it's such a brutal game I didn't really bother. One last thing to say about Vidtec / U.S.Games is overall, these are pretty cool games in the Atari library, mostly because there's variations on the games. There's actually 16 different variations on this game. There's really only one on here, and then there's 4 different versions of Sneak and Peek. Even though some of these games aren't the best, obviously having different variations of the game means more replayability. So it's definitely worth your money to pick them up if you have the time to kind of go through the different variations. The fact that I didn't like it doesn't necessarily mean you won't like it, but I can almost guarantee that most people probably aren't really going to want to play Sneak and Peek. Okay, jumping on to the CBS Electronics. Before I do that, I figured I'd talk about this one game because I'm really never going to have a chance to talk about it again. It's by Epix. It is called California Games. This game was released on the Nintendo Entertainment System. I believe it was released on the Master System, and it was even released on the Sega Genesis. It's one of those games that gets better as the graphics got better with time. The Nintendo Entertainment version is definitely much recommended, and then obviously the Sega Genesis 16-bit version looks even better and controls even better. I didn't really care for this. I didn't really have a whole lot to say. Obviously, because I'm an Atari collector and I'm always looking for different games and expanding my library, I picked it up, plus it was kind of a neat-looking cartridge you don't normally see all white. So on to the CBS Electronic Games. Obviously you guys know who CBS is. CBS. So first up, I'm just going to start with Blueprint. Blueprint was like really weird. It was sort of a kind of a platformer type game. It was just weird. There was weird music. Basically, you have to go around and collect items, and you have to collect them in a certain order, and then you have to, once you get all the parts, I think, for like the gun or rocket or whatever, you have to shoot something before it kills you. Honestly, this is one of those games that you definitely need the manual for. Even looking up footage of it online and reviews of it online just doesn't do the game justice. One other quick thing to say about the CBS video games is they look like they're games from like World War I or something. Like they look like, you know, army cartridges for like rations for like cigarettes and food or something. Like it's just, they're just the ugliest looking things I've ever seen in my life. Whoever decided to use this or go with this plastic, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. Solar Fox. Flying shooter. It was a very unique game. This one is actually pretty cool, but for me, I felt like it suffered from absolutely awful controlling. This is one of those games that I definitely want to do my own personal review on, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but I did not like the controls on this at all. And then finally, Gorf. A lot of you probably heard of Gorf before. It's a very fun game. Absolutely recommend it. It's kind of hard. but there's definitely some fun elements to Gorf, for sure. Essentially another top-down shooter like Space Invaders or Galaga. I'm probably going to reference Galaga quite a bit because I love games like that where you just kind of take out enemies. Enemies move a little bit differently, and each level gets a little bit harder. Definitely a game that's worth mastering. Definitely a game that's worth playing. I recommend this, high on my list. Very, very fun game for sure. Easily the best of the CBS video games library that I have. Okay, up next we have the Coleco games. These ones overall are kind of in the same realm as the Vidtec games. They're just kind of weird. I don't really know what to say about them. Smurf. This is one of the more, I'd say, high-tech, high-end Atari games. Graphics incredible. Music very crystal clear. It looks almost like a very primitive Nintendo game, which is actually saying quite a lot. However, I don't like the controls. The jumping in the game is absolutely awful, and I cannot even make it past the third or fourth screen. This is another game that I definitely will be doing a review on, for sure. But one cool thing with this game, I do have the manual right here. So 1982 by Coleco. Obviously they made some systems like the ColecoVision. So it's a real shame because this is a game that I really expected to be better, and it's just the controls are just so absolutely awful. It really ruins the game, but definitely cool for sure. Moving on, there's Venture, of course. A lot of people may know this game. I like this one a lot. It's a ton of fun. It definitely gets harder as the game goes on. There's 4 levels to move through. Once you beat all 4 levels, you just basically redo the whole game again, except you got to move a little faster and the enemies are harder. It's kind of hard to explain it. Definitely another game that I'll be reviewing on my own. I'm sure you guys are going to get sick of hearing that, but definitely expect to hear more about Venture. Totally recommend it. If you guys haven't played it, get your hands on it. And then finally we have Mousetrap. To the naked eye, these are actually different. They may look exactly the same to you guys, but if you look at the top, this one says, like, what is the word? Exides Mousetrap. But for some reason the one on this side does not say it. So obviously these are just variants. I wouldn't say one is worth more over the other. They might have just been made at different times or made at different locations. But either way, I'm nuts when it comes to this kind of stuff. Obviously only I care about something so goofy. But this game is excellent. Of the 3 of them, I would say this one's probably my favorite. The controls are a little bit more smoother than Venture. Obviously this is sort of a Pac-Man type game, but with a really interesting twist. Expect a review. Obviously these are variants. These are just different Imagic cases that I have here. This is a blue label. You don't normally see this one around too often, so that's pretty cool. Obviously this is a version with a picture on the front of it, and then obviously this is the version with a picture without the picture on it. From some of the research that I actually did for once, it appeared that later in the Atari's lifespan they began doing this to kind of garner attention and make the cartridges stand out more, obviously help them to sell better, and to just kind of make them look a little bit better. Obviously it looks a lot nicer when you condense all the information and put a cool picture on there of like a spaceship flying through space. Obviously this is probably the ugliest of the Imagic games, and it's kind of strange how it has the classic Activision back. So you usually only see a cart like this by Activision. So it's kind of interesting. Not sure how they got away with that. But As always, it's a top-down shooter. You're at the bottom of the screen. You're firing against enemies, aliens, whatever. Awesome gameplay, awesome sound. A lot of people say that this is a rip-off of Phoenix. I have not played Phoenix yet, but I do know of Phoenix, and Phoenix definitely seems like a cool game. At some point, I would like to get around to playing that. But there are some Atari games that are tough to find. So if you haven't played Demon Attack, I totally recommend it. This is like in my top 5 expected review. Star Voyager was a very odd one for me. It's sort of like a point of view flyer where you're actually, the screen itself is like the spaceship, I guess, window, and you're kind of firing at things. It's okay. It gets a little old after a while. Didn't have a whole lot to say about it. The sound in it's great. It's classic, you know, Atari sounds, explosions. The graphics really aren't the best. There's a lot of circles and squares and stuff. I may get around to doing a review of this. But once again, there was like tons and tons of games that had the word star in it. This is definitely one that you can skip over. But if you come across it for cheap, pick it up and try it out. You may like it. I'm more a type of fan of the games where you can see the ship and fight the enemies. I don't actually like that kind of Top Gun view, you know, where you actually, the screen is the plane. I don't know. I just never really got into those. Cosmic Arc. Holy cow, man. Let me tell you. Underrated game. Extremely underrated game on the Atari 2600. I don't ever hear anybody talk about this game. I don't ever really see this game out in the wild. And I don't even quite remember when or where I got it. This might have been one of the games I got from my buddy Josh recently. It's very hard to explain the gameplay. I'm definitely going to be doing a review of this. This particular game, it basically swaps between your spaceship firing, except you don't move. Your spaceship is essentially the size of the screen, and you have a cannon up top, right and left, and then a cannon down below. So depending on where the enemy comes from, you just press down or, you know, move the joystick, you know, where you need to move it to, and then your ship automatically fires. And then once you kill all the enemies, you land on a planet, and you send down a little UFO that picks up little people. And the storyline for this is incredible. I don't have the manual, but I read it online. And it's very, very well done. Totally recommend going out and finding this. That's in my top 5 for sure. The rest of these, I don't really have a whole lot to say. Trick Shot is your standard pool game. Unfortunately, the controls are very awful. Firefighter is sort of a platformer where you're putting out fires and rescuing one guy over and over and over again from a building. It gets very monotonous, gets very boring. Don't really recommend those. Riddle of the Sphinx, at some point I'll get around to talking about more. This is one of my earliest cartridges that I collected. I found this one in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania at, I believe it was called Play and Trade. Incredible store. Essentially, you're moving through the desert and you have to worry about picking up water so that you don't die of thirst, but you also have to find keys and you have to unlock certain pyramids and stuff. And it's a very strange game, and it deserves its own review. If you find it in the wild, I recommend picking it up. If you can find the manual, you're going to need it, so keep an eye out for the manual. And then finally, we have Atlantis. We're coming right back to Missile Command. Many games, obviously, were like either Pac-Man, or Space Invaders, or Missile Command. And this is no exception. It's boring, very repetitive. It doesn't really add a whole lot to the, you know, shooter formula. It looks beautiful. It looks pretty neat, and it's the life system is a little bit different. Once again, you do have the ability to regain, like, you know, you have 3 different, you have 3 guns that you control. So if you lose a gun, you actually have the ability to regain a gun for sure. So anyhow, those are the Imagic games. I'm just trying to keep this as short as possible. Real quickly, once again, thanks to Colin Richards for the idea for this. I really hope this comes off interesting. Obviously, you know, you guys leave me feedback, you know, for what you think. If you think you'd be interested in watching me, you know, review any of these games with game footage, you know, leave it in the comment section below. Alright, and finally, last but certainly not least, we have our Activision games. Like I showed you guys earlier, Activision games tend to have the label that wraps around the front that never ends, whereas a lot of games, you know, there's like a piece of plastic there. Another cool thing that a lot of people may know or may not know, Activision was very forward with their, the people that made the games, the people that designed them or created them, their names were actually on the cartridge itself. A lot of times when you play the game, the word Activision's at the bottom of the screen the entire time. And even in some of the early Atari commercials, they would mention, you know, designed by David Crane, you know, designed by Steve Cartwright. They really gave the designers a lot of attention and a lot of kind of public market appeal, so to speak, so that the actual public knew who was making the games. It's kind of interesting because there's a lot of other games in the library that I play, and, you know, the logo is not so in your face, but Activision is like, they're proud of their fucking shit, as they should be, because they did actually make a lot of good games. I'd say the worst, though, of all of these is Barnstorming. You literally do exactly what it says, which is fly a plane through barns, and you storm them with the plane. Very boring, monotonous. Don't recommend it. As far as the racing games go, I already talked about these in another video. I may get around to talking about those a little bit more in detail. But for this list, I pretty much was avoiding sports and racing games. I'm going to hold off those two for a later for a later review, because in general, I don't really count sports games in the same category with like racers and flyers and adventure games and stuff like that. They're kind of different genres, and you know, you can definitely base a system on its games, but it's tough to like pick apart sports games because they pretty much are just sports games. Some of them are better than others, but at the end of the day, they're just sports games. So it's hard to kind of like fuck up a sports game, but then again, it's also hard to... You also have to put a lot of work into it to make it a good game. So if you guys want me to talk about sports games, I will, but obviously I don't really have much to say about them otherwise. Same thing with games like boxing and skiing. They're just kind of almost like filler. You know, boxing, a lot of people have talked about this. They look like crabs with, you know, with wearing gloves. Skiing is literally you're just skiing down a mountain. Games like this have to be put on the system because there's people out there that are interested in this stuff. But I tend to be more interested in the games that are like creative and different. You know, like Stampede, for example. You know, that's an interesting game where there's a lot going on and there's a lot of replayability, and you know, it's kind of interesting. You don't see something like that all the time. But to take something that already exists, like baseball, and make it into a game, it's like, that's not really interesting to me. I'm sure it's fun, but it's like, I want something crazy and different, like Riddle of the Sphinx. You know, like, that's, like, what the fuck is that? Alright, so finally, wrapping up the games here. There's River Raid, of course. A lot of people know River Raid. This is the classic top-down shooter where you're just flying down a river and you're just shooting up a bunch of shit. This is going to be a controversial statement for sure, because I know a lot of Atari fans out there love this game. I thought the controls fucking sucked, and I definitely really don't recommend this. I would skip River Raid. This is one of these weird Atari games for some reason that is raising in price. I don't know why. It's kind of a rarer game. I got it for practically nothing, but if you see it and it's more than like $3 or $4, just avoid it because there's not a whole lot of reason to get it. I personally didn't care a whole lot for the game. I definitely will be giving this a fair review, and I definitely will be playing more of this to see if there's something that I'm missing, because apparently this is like one of the more popular Atari titles. Star Master is actually more similar to Star Voyager. How funny they both have the word star in them. Once again, it's sort of a point of view shooter. I think I'm talking about the right game. Obviously, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But as you can see, it's one of those games where the screen is the shield. Man, I don't know what the hell's going on. It's getting like itchy. But the screen is the shield, and I mean your screen is like the front of the ship, and you're flying through and you're shooting at stuff, and it's okay. The cool thing about this game that is really fucking interesting is you use on the Atari 2600. You have the black and white switch right there, and that normally swaps the TV between color and black and white. But for this game, you actually use this to pull up your map so that you know where to go on the screen to like fight aliens. But the thing that really hurts this game is the inverted controls. I don't know who invented inverted controls. I don't know why they exist in games, because real life, up is up and down is fucking down. But in these games, up means down and down means up and left means... And it's like fucking confusing because you're used to hitting the right button to go right, but in this game you're hitting the right button to go left, and it causes some massive problems. Okay, so we're... finally, I'm down to the last Activision game, which is Spider Fighter. And as per usual, I held the best for last. Spider Fighter, as it flies out of my hand, is actually an incredible shooting game, as you can tell. I call them the top-down shooting games, or the Space Invader-like games where you're shooting things from above. You actually are a can of
So of course my fucking camera did it to me again. It randomly just stopped fucking recording in the middle of my segment talking about Spider Fighter for the Atari 2600. And I thought it was something I was doing wrong on my end while I was editing the video. And then I realized, no, the fucking camera just stopped recording. I'm not entirely sure what is the problem. It is still persisting. It is still happening. Obviously, this is the same problem I ran into with my question series videos. I've run into this problem before with DVD drinking series episodes. I have no fucking clue exactly what's happening. The only thing I could think of is that because it's voice activated, things that I'm saying may be triggering the phone to stop recording, but it's like 2 specific words, and almost everything I say does not sound like them. And I'm not going to say those words because I don't want this camera, this footage right now, to stop fucking recording. Finish what I was saying on Spider Fighter. It's a very fun game. It's a very exciting game. Top-down shooter. You're at the bottom and you just shoot things at the top of the screen, but you got to protect your fruit and food from the bugs stealing it. So they do come over to the, towards the food, and they can take it away. And there's also, enemies that come at you, and there's also enemies that shoot at you. So it's very intense, and there's a lot going on. But if you kind of just zone out and just focus on the screen and just zone life out, you really get sucked into the game. And this is one of those games that truly immerses you without it being a gigantic Skyrim of a game. It's so simple, but it still sucks you in. You kind of forget about reality because you have to in order to play this game. It almost feels like I'm at the arcade, just glued to the screen. It's simply incredible. If you have a good solid, 15-20 minutes to just kill, and you just want to get sucked into something away, you want to get sucked away from reality for a little bit, play this game. You will not be disappointed. Anyway, thus concludes this episode I have some more Atari goodies as well as the remaining rest of my collection to discuss. So thank you for watching another segment from the amazing Atari Aficionado. And I'll see you guys next time.